guys, it's Ariana. Welcome back to my channel. So for today's video, we're going to be reading some more scary stories. As per usual, I have my wicked candle in here, making the whole room smell like caramel apples. And I have a bunch of scary stories saved on my phone. So I'm going to be reading from there for a couple of the stories because they've been waiting for quite a while. These are just comments on a post and I asked permission from the authors, but I'm not gonna say any names or anything, so I'm just gonna jump into the creepy stories. Living in my old house, I had a ceramic figure of a bird, probably about 3 to 5 pounds because it wasn't hollow, placed on a shelf across my room with a couple of papers underneath it. I was facing the opposite way of the shelf when I heard a whoosh of paper. I turned around and I saw the paper fall and the ceramic bird fly across the room onto my bed, at least 9 feet away. When that happened, the lights went off and then turned back on. That scared me, so I ran out of my room and I went into the living room to see a picture of my grandfather fall off of the mantle in the living room. It was his birthday that day and I hadn't visited his grave yet because I was waiting for my ride. I visit his grave every year on his birthday and at Christmas time to give him a cold beer. The ceramic bird that flew across the room was handmade by him. I think it was him just trying to remind me that I need to bring him his beer. I also checked the leveling of the shelf after that happened. Since shelves can start to tilt after a while, but it was perfectly level. Even if it would have been off by a little bit, it doesn't explain how a ceramic piece would shoot across the room like that. And that's their story, so that's really creepy, but it does sound like your grandfather was letting you know that he's waiting and he wants his beer. So that one's kind of a cute story, but also at the same time really terrifying. This didn't necessarily happen while I was alone, but I've got a few from my current residence, which I'm convinced is haunted. I wasn't home for this one, but I've got a few people's accounts. Late one night, unsure of what time it was because I wasn't told, from up in the attic crawl space, a loud noise that sounded like a radio playing unrecognizable music began to be heard by everyone in the house. People at the house were obviously scared as it woke up most of them. They went to investigate and the sound continued to persist for about 30 minutes and they found nothing. They checked the crawl space where the sound was coming from and they didn't find a thing. I was present for the next 2. One thing that happened was around 1 a.m. I had just gotten out of the shower. I work very odd hours and I was drying myself off. Now, our bathroom seems to be a hot spot for odd activity. Feelings of being watched, sounds like people pacing in the hallway just outside the door, even if you're home alone. But I'll never forget when I got out of the shower and I heard, clear as day, a voice say in my left ear, "When are you going to bed tonight?" This freaked me out, so I ran out of my bathroom and I didn't go back into it at all that night. The last thing I can remember is the night I had been woken up by something. I can't remember what it was that woke me up, maybe just a bad vibe in the room, and I looked over towards my girlfriend's side of the bed and I saw a shadowy figure sitting on the bed in the position she is usually in if she's having trouble sleeping. I asked if she was okay, and I didn't get a response. I asked again louder, this time thinking maybe she didn't hear me. She's known to listen to music when she can't sleep to tire herself out. Still, I got no response, so I reached over to tap her arm, and I didn't feel anything. About this time, she actually did wake up, and she sat up and asked me what was going on, and I could no longer see the figure. Neither of us could sleep the rest of the night after that when I told her what had happened. Just a few stories from that house that kind of meet the criteria of this question. We've had other small things happen, but those are the very real obvious ones that have happened that led me to believe something is going on in my place. So I believe the question was, have you ever encountered anything paranormal? The next one that I'm going to read is from the ghost story section. So this one is actually a Reddit post instead of just a saved photo on my phone. And it's from the Reddit author Plut_OO. And it's titled, "They Don't Come If You Sleep on Your Side." This happened to me when I was in high school. One week, I was having difficulty sleeping. I remember specifically one night, I was having an awful dream where I was stuck in bed and I couldn't move. It reminded me of a movie I watched where a person was awake during surgery and was paralyzed. It creeped me the fuck out. I told my mom about it and she said I was probably because of the movie I watched. The next night, I woke up again in the middle of the night and was having such a difficult time falling back asleep. I decided to roll onto my stomach. When I rolled, I realized how dark the hallway was. For context, I share a bedroom with my younger sibling. We share bunk beds while I slept on the bottom bunk and she was on the top. The way the bed was placed was against the wall facing the bedroom door, which led to a long hallway. It creeped me the hell out because it was just abnormally dark. Just looked like a damn void. I relaxed my head onto the pillow and that's when I felt something jump on my back. The minute I gasped, I felt my body just sink into the bed, and this unbearable amount of pressure on top of me, I began to panic. I was trying very hard to lift myself, and all I could move was my neck and head. I began screaming for my mom, or screaming for help from anyone, only for pressure to creep onto my neck and then my head. Next was my jaw locking. I was only able to make guttural sounds. No one came to my help. My sibling was sound asleep above me, and no one could hear me. I was terrified. I began feeling claustrophobic, and I began to panic even more. I began praying the Hail Mary in my head over and over. After a few minutes, the pressure began to lift away, starting at my head down to my ankles. As I finished the prayer, it felt like hands slowly releasing my ankles. I was so scared to move. I kept praying just a little bit longer before climbing next to my sibling, and I spent the night next to them. The next day, I told my mom what happened, and she told me a demon was trying to get me for being a bad kid. Bullshit, I know. But what she told me after actually weirded me out. After her rant, she told me, "You have to sleep on your side. They don't come when you sleep on your side. Prop yourself up using pillows, but never sleep on your back, only on your side." Later that day, she gave me a gold necklace of a cross. It would be years since I experienced another similar incident. To this day, I always wonder, was it sleep paralysis or something more? And that was their whole story. So that is a very, very intense version of sleep paralysis. That's terrifying. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. I hope I never experienced sleep paralysis like that ever. I've only experienced it once, and I explained that in a previous video very recently, what I experienced. So if you're curious, go watch one of my other videos. But sleep paralysis is nothing to mess with. And people that actually try to go into sleep paralysis and lucid dream, that freaks me the fuck out. I would never want to put myself in the state like that. That's just too scary for me. So the next one that I want to read is from the Spoopy Cjades section. It is from the Reddit author something-strange-22, and it's titled, "We lived in that house for 3 days." I'm currently 27, but this story takes place when I was about 9 or 10. I remember it like it was yesterday. My mom and my then stepdad had gotten married not too long before they started house hunting. He lived in a town about an hour away, and outside of our school district. My younger brother was probably 5 at the time, and I absolutely refused to switch schools. The house hunting didn't really last too long, and they bought a house about 10 minutes from my hometown. It was an older house and had being empty once we first saw it, given it a natural creepy feel. But I had felt a pit of doom feeling in my stomach the first time I saw it. Let's get into the night that I knew it wasn't just a creepy old-looking house. Move-in day. We had our cars packed up with what we could and were headed to a new house. It hit me so suddenly that something was wrong. I'm sure others know what I mean when I say that I had this horrible gut feeling that something really bad was going to happen, or that something was just not right. I don't get these feelings often, but I have always gotten them when I do. Something is off, and my mom knew that as well. I tried to hold it in as long as I could, but the feeling just kept growing. So I spat it out to my mom. She took me very seriously, and she pulled the car over to the side of the road to listen. I couldn't pinpoint what exactly was wrong, but I tried my best to explain that something bad was happening or was going to happen. My stepdad was in the car behind us, and he pulled over when we did. He thought we were going crazy. He essentially told us to get over it and just keep going. That night, once we got everything we needed out of the car, we tried to get as comfortable as we could, since we didn't have all of our furniture moved in yet. The feeling was still there though, but there was nothing else that I could do besides try to calm myself down and convince myself that it was just a little anxiety. What didn't help was our dog not wanting to go into the living room, and when he did go into the living room, he would defensively stand towards the corner and bark nonstop. I refused to go into that room for the duration of our stay as well. Since it was a school night, it wasn't long before they wanted us to go to bed, but the last thing I did that night was sleep. My brother was afraid to sleep alone. With it being a new house, so he and my mom wanted me to stay in his room for the night. To be honest, I was beyond okay with this. No matter how annoyed I could get with my brother at that age, nothing could have convinced me to sleep alone that night. My mom had left the bedroom doors open a crack in case we would need anything. Even though my brother fell asleep quickly, it didn't take any time at all to feel like I wasn't the only one awake. I can't remember what we had had on the TV, but what I do vividly remember is trying to concentrate on whatever was on so that I could avoid the overwhelming feeling of being stared at through the crack in the door. I found it hard not to stare back, but I knew I shouldn't. It had gotten to me though. I eventually went to open the door to see what was staring at me. As you can guess, there was no one there. I tried to give myself a mental pep talk, but shortly after I got comfortable and I started watching the TV again, the walking started. My stepdad had always been able to hear practically any noise while sleeping. So with the TV down so low, there were obvious footsteps going up and down the hallway. Not just footsteps, but the creaking that goes along with them in an old house. I again just tried to ignore it and focus on the TV. I think I even genuinely tried to force myself to sleep so that I didn't have to listen to it anymore. Eventually, I had gathered up enough courage to go see what the hell was going on, and you guessed it, there was no one there. Somehow, I managed to fall asleep regardless of the noise. My stepdad wasn't going to take anything I had to say seriously, so it was just brushed off. But my mom had done her best to comfort me the next morning because she had experienced the exact same thing. When my brother and I were at school the next day, my mom was alone in the house and had started unpacking in the kitchen. While she was putting dishes away, she heard and felt someone whisper her name into her ear and was terrified when she realized she was the only one there. At the time, she thought that there was probably my stepdad messing around with her, but to her horror, he was at work. I probably wouldn't have even known about this incident if I hadn't been for him making fun of her that evening while we were trying to figure out what our dog was still barking at. Everyone felt the heaviness of whatever was happening at this point, but we all just tried to ignore it. That night, while I was still dealing with the staring and walking in the hallway, my stepdad and my mom had an experience that was the final straw for my mom. In the middle of the night, my mom had woken up to my stepdad on his hands and knees looking through the floor vent and mumbling to himself in a panic. My mom, obviously scared and confused, tried to wake him up and get him back into bed, but was given the response, "They're coming after me, they're coming after me." He was having the most realistic nightmare that he was being chased by hundreds of demons with knives and pitchforks and was looking down through the vent because that's where they were coming from. Through the vent was the living room where my dog never stopped barking and the corner that he refused to go into. The next day after school, we didn't go back to that house. We stayed at my grandma's for the night, and I personally never stepped foot in that house again. I'm not quite sure of all of these next details, but apparently my mom had found out the history of the house. The extent that she would mention to me, which is still a lot, was that the previous owner had been involved in some very not good activities and had eventually ended his own life there. I have a feeling there were other things that may have happened that I was never told. I've never dug into the details too much out of fear. I don't know why, but it just feels as if I'm not supposed to know exactly what went on there. Every time I drive by that house now, Pit of Doom returns. They bought a house a few miles away shortly after what felt like an eternity in that house. Thanks for reading, and I'm sorry that this was so long. So that wasn't very long, that was perfect. I love longer stories like that because it really lets you get into them, and I just enjoy long stories, but that is a really terrifying experience. I hate it when animals won't go into a specific room, or they're seeing something or they're feeling something and like you can't see what they're feeling, but you can very clearly see that they're sensing an energy that you can't see, and that is just fucking terrifying. So thank you so much for allowing me to read your story. That story is absolutely so scary. I hate that so much, but thank you again for allowing me to read it. So if you guys made it to the end of the video, please leave me your favorite Halloween emoji down in my comment section below so you guys can let me know that you made it to the end of the video. If you guys did enjoy this video and you want to send me any of your guys' own personal scary stories, feel free to reach out to me either over Instagram or you can message me over my email and I will be happy to read your guys' stories. So thank you so much for watching and I will see you guys at the next one.